Hello friends, and welcome to this, which is episode 3 of Essential Racing Strategies. Break out the pencils, get them sharpened, it's class time. If you are new to Essential Racing Strategies, welcome. This is a video series dedicated to helping racers improve their ability to race against other drivers in Gran Turismo 7 Sport Mode. Right now we are on episode 3 of Essential Racing Strategies, focused on E through C rated drivers. If you haven't seen episodes 1 or 2 yet, I highly advise that you do that shortly, as all these episodes are building off one another. This episode is probably one of the most heartfelt that we're going to have so far. This is really a message that is meant to be from me to you. You might call it a heart-to-heart. You will find that in our strategies today, there was going to be a little bit of tough love that I'm going to have to dish out, and possibly some tough lessons that we got to learn. You honestly might not want to hear all that I have to say, and in the end, you might end up disagreeing. That's okay if you do, but I think there is some real value to the things that we're going to be discussing today. Today we are talking about mental strength while racing, the mentalities that we need to employ, specifically for E through C rated lobbies. I bring this up because, well, let's get real for a moment. The daily race experience in an E through C lobby can be pretty rough. There's a lot of contact between cars. Some of that contact is light. Other times it's pretty heavy and rough. All of this can really end up derailing a person mentally as they're racing the daily races. The mentality that we're going to be promoting in this episode is not easy to maintain. But I have actually been secretly preparing you for this in the last 2 episodes. The top priority that we discussed in the previous episode will be especially helpful for you with this mindset. We won't overcome these incidents by accident, friends. It will only be done deliberately. It starts with the right mindset that then moves us into the right actions. The mindset required, what we're looking at today, specifically for E through C rated lobbies, is to focus on yourself and be disciplined. Why is this the mindset that I'm suggesting? Because, well, it's in contrast to what seems to be the primary focus for many. What is that, you ask? The opposite mentality could be described as something like this: focus on what everyone else is doing to you and retaliate the way you see fit. In other words, just focus on everything that's happening to you. Focus on everything bad that's happening around you by other drivers. And when it affects you negatively, then you end up thinking, well, that justifies any response or any retaliation that I might have. And the reality is, this is not a healthy place to be in. And I find that many seem to be focused, or not focused, but they seem to be stuck in this mental rut. This mentality, this rut, is not beneficial really for a couple of main reasons. Number one, you might end up blame shifting when, in fact, you might be the one that's at fault. And even if you're not fully at fault, you might share part of the blame. Number two, you don't own your mistakes. So you don't end up evaluating them and learning how to improve. Improving upon those mistakes, seeing where you potentially went off or did the wrong thing, and then filing that away and correcting that for future similar circumstances. And the third reason why it's not beneficial is because when you do certain actions that give you low finishes, you don't gain DR and you don't accomplish goals of getting to the next level. What kind of consequences are we talking about? Well, the collision penalties you are accruing, plus the time spent off track, the damage, the dirty tires you are getting, all these are leading to the poor finishes that we're talking about. Not only that, if there's enough collisions penalties, you will end up with a DR reset. Your SR can get low enough so that it affects your DR. I find that in racing, when I look at other people's mistakes and how they affect me, I always could have done better than I did. And by always, I do mean every time. Even if I get pushed off track, I still believe there is a way that I could have avoided it. And when I watch a replay, this is almost always the case. So let me give you some fundamental principles that you can follow to ingrain in your mentality, if you will. If you do this, Your experiences will be better while racing, and you will improve as a racer. Firstly, not everyone that bumps into you is a dirty driver. There are actually many reasons that someone might hit you, and those reasons wouldn't fall in the dirty category at all. I've noticed that there can be many assumptions that are made, or some automatic assumptions that if you get hit, that person is automatically a dirty driver that hits you. But there are some real factors, especially in E through C rated lobbies and E through C rated drivers. They will be less skilled, and they will hit you accidentally. You don't have to let that get to you. If you get knocked off track, get back on the track and keep going. Because of the multitude of mistakes that are typically made by drivers at this skill level, if you get back on track after getting hit off, and you stay on track the rest of the way, or most of the time, mostly you stay on track, you could still gain multiple positions, and perhaps still gain driver rating. Some of these accidental hits can happen because someone just honestly missed their braking point. They missed their turn-in point. Sometimes it happens because they end up taking the wrong racing line altogether. I'm guilty of some of these things, even now as an A+ rated driver. But in the E through C rated lobbies, and from these drivers that are there, all of those mistakes are exaggerated. Because most of the time, these mistakes lead to overcorrections, which ultimately lead to them going off the circuit. And if someone ends up being in there and innocent, they could end up hitting them as well. If you keep your nerve, and you keep a level head, getting back on the circuit and running your race can get you many, many spots back. Not only that, it could be that that person that hits you, well, the only reason they hit you actually is because someone else knocked into them. Remember this, while you are racing, whatever view you use, whether it's the same as I use, chase cam, or you use a bumper cam or something in between, you have a very narrow vantage point. And what happens to you on track and what you see does not tell the whole story. Sometimes when you end up looking at a replay after a race, you find out that the person that hit you was the initial victim of someone else's hit, and you happen to be another casualty. Furthermore, as we look at these principles, another one that we want to discuss is that we need to determine to survive interactions with other drivers. What do we mean by that? Well, apart from the first lap when everyone is around you, during the course of a race, whether it's a short one or a long one, you will catch other racers, and other racers will catch you. Space that you had will no longer be there, whether it's from behind or whether it's in front of you. Remember this, you have the right to be where you are, and they have the right to be where they are. As we've said in previous episodes, you must be committed to maintaining as much distance as possible from others. But along with that, you must be also committed to giving as much space. How will you survive interactions by others? By doing the very best you can to not hit the other person. I find that many times things start to spiral out of control because of one initial hit that leads to another. And then suddenly two people start going at it like it's a boxing match and not GT7. As you get closer to other drivers and they get closer to you, it's okay to lose a position. It's okay to not gain a position. Chances are, in the course of a race, you'll have a shot to get that position back or to get another chance at gaining a position. There can be a tendency when getting close to another racer that there's a tension that builds up, and mentally we end up getting very stressed and we're very concerned about what's going to happen next. I think this is common. I think this is normal. But what ends up happening is we end up driving more poorly when we have those tense moments. What we really need to do is realize, look, this is a common interaction that can happen while racing. Racing with other drivers means there's going to be other racers on the track with you, right? So when we get close to each other, when that happens, it is a little bit of a chess match. It's a little bit of a dance, you might say. And there's a little bit of jockeying for position. Sometimes it lasts one corner and it's over. Sometimes it can last multiple corners, whichever one it is, multiple, one, or something in between. Be determined to survive the interaction. Sometimes that tension can arise because you end up thinking this is automatically going to end up bad for me. It doesn't have to. Do your part to survive the interaction. The person coming behind you isn't automatically a dirty driver. He's not automatically going to pass you in a dirty way. Hold your nerve. Focus on the fundamentals that keep you on track. This will end up going a long way to helping you survive interactions with other drivers that get close to you. What can sometimes happen when we are tense and when we're getting stressed because there's another driver close is that we end up blocking or we end up driving erratically. When this happens, this only aggravates the other person around you. And in reality, when you're doing that, it's making you slower as well. Make this a regular part of your racecraft. The more space you give, the less likely you are to be hit. It really is that simple. We mentioned this because it so often seems like this is not what happens on track. Space is not being given. In fact, often space is being taken from people, it appears. And this can lead to a lot of rough times with other drivers. And it culminates into some pretty big hits often and can actually end up ruining your race. In the example that we're about to see here, we have someone who definitely is the victim of bumps and some pretty nasty driving, but it didn't have to be as bad as it ended up. He starts on the grid P8, so middle of the field. You know, this is a mostly C-rated lobby with a couple of Bs in here. Now, this particular race that I was in had a lot to do with the nameless one, we shall call him in P9. You see, he doesn't really have, he just has a dash there. P9, the nameless one, is the causer of many a disturbance in this race. So, I want to showcase this as an example of how someone allows all the bumping and even the dirt that is dealt to him, but he lets it get to him and it hurts his finish more so than it needed to. So let's advance here just a little bit. So he's lost a place, but he's about to gain 1 and 2 positions, I think. Yeah, because and look, we have no doubt about this individual. He's now in P6 and he's taken out 2 people and pushed to pass in 1 other instance. So this qualifies as a dirty driver. However, just because there is a deliberate dirty driver does not mean that you have to succumb to the frustration that will take place. So let's continue to watch here. Manages to catch up, and look, he bangs into him. I don't think it's just a racing incident. He was trying to go the way he was going to go. Does get damaged because of it. He got a penalty because he went too wide. Now, this is where I think things start to really get unhappy. And what he does here is completely wrong, and it's totally deliberate. You can see the steering inputs. He totally goes right into him twice, pinches him up against the wall. So let's find him again. He ends up putting him in last place. So this is a major bummer. But it's lap 2. There are still positions to be gained, and you'll see that's the case. Now, at the end of P3, he's just starting to catch up. Now, he can see his offender in the distance there. And they both get into it, and look what the opportunity that he takes. Now, I want to pause it right here. This is an area in which he could grab 2 more spots, possibly more. Instead, what does he do? You guessed it. He goes for the punt. Now let's watch that again. He goes for the punt, and the game doesn't even give him the satisfaction of hitting him. The game ghosts his offender. And because of this, he finishes last. Now, someone does quit, it looks like, but he is effectively last place. The DR that he lost in this was more than the DR he would have lost if he had just left the guy alone. This is an example of an individual letting all the bumping and the dirty driving get to him, and it gives him a worse result than it would have otherwise. Another fundamental principle that we want to look at is that you don't have to win the race, and races are not won or lost in the first lap. Patience really is key in these lobbies, and it will truly pay off, both in the short run and the long run. Remember that most of your competitors are inconsistent. They are going to make serious mistakes that will ruin their races. Don't be one of them. Determine that you're not going to be one of them. If someone passes you, fairly or otherwise, in the first lap, let it go. It is literally not a big deal. Holding on to a grudge or plotting revenge only makes you drive worse. Instead, someone passes you, and maybe they even do it in a contactful way, in a dirty way, or maybe just a careless way. Focus on your lines in that first lap. Position yourself so that you have as much space as possible. Here is some further example of the same race and some other individuals who, it's the end of the race, we're on the final lap, and these folks have had their fair share of bumps and bruises. And let's just move up here. We'll give it from this point of view. These two up ahead, P8 and P7, they don't give each other room. And this guy decides to block, which is not great. At this point, it's my opinion that P7 should go ahead and switch over to the left side. He's got room to do it, and that's what he should do. Instead, he stays the course and goes basically right into P7. This is unnecessary, and it ruins both of their races. Another principle that we're going to be looking at right now, this one could get controversial and maybe even hit home a little bit. Getting hit off track is not an excuse for your inability to rank up in GT7. It's not. Don't let it become one. Even if you've thought that to this point in your GT7 career, it's time to eradicate it from your mentality. We touched on this actually in the beginning of this episode. Expectations are really key. If you go into a race and you expect to not get hit, to not be tapped, to not be bumped, well, it is no wonder then that you'd be upset and frustrated more often than not, because you're getting hit, you're getting bumped, you're getting tapped, you're getting punted. It's happening, right? If that is your expectation when going onto the circuit, I'm here to tell you in really just simple terms, your expectation is unrealistic. You will get nudged. You will get hit. You will get punted. You will get run off track. It is going to happen many times, right? Likely in every race that you're in. Even when the lobbies get faster and the drivers get cleaner, the hits and the pumps don't stop. It's how you handle it that makes the most difference. Are we going to be people that when this happens, we just sit there and we be upset and we think it's so unfair? No, we need to control what we can control, and we need to not worry about what we can't control. We need to handle our own part, and we need to not worry about everybody else. Another fundamental principle of this mentality that we want to focus on, well, this one's going to be tough to talk about. We must determine that we will not retaliate to being hit. Now, I understand that this might fundamentally go against the grain of your thinking, but I am here to tell you from experience, it's the best route to take. As we just discussed, you might retaliate against somebody for hitting you, and it isn't even their fault. Someone else hit them into you. Now let's go ahead and look at Prochel. Prochel qualified. He was a C-rated driver in this lobby. He started in the back with me, however. His qualifying time wasn't up to speed. And let's see how he gets through the field. So his interaction with the nameless one comes a bit later, if I recall. So on the second lap, the nameless one is right in front of him. He's about to serve a half-second penalty. He gets an interaction with this individual. I'm in P10 at the moment. Now, this is a great example of someone who doesn't let somebody who's just being a real terror on track get to him mentally. So let's look at what takes place here. You can see he's about to not give space. How does ProShell handle it? He ends up hitting him. No damage is done. And then he goes into the turn. He goes a little bit slower. You see he's actually not going to try and finish him off or get revenge or anything like that. ProShell takes the turn like he's going side by side with someone. He's down about 10 miles per hour than you would normally be. He completes it. A little bit more bumping, so that's frustrating, right? He's just trying to hold his line, and Jack Flash was a little erratic, ended up hitting him. So it's possible, yeah, we could get frustrated and upset at this point, but let's see how this straight goes. He just goes on his merry way. Doesn't try to get revenge, nothing like that. What takes place? Lap 4, he's moved up to P8. Alright, so we have two people up. One's trying to make a move on the other. Actually, we looked at these folks earlier, didn't we? Remember what's going to happen to them? There's a little bit of contact there. Nothing egregious, but someone's not happy about it. So instead of just letting things be, there's blocking going on, there's weaving. ProShell, he's not going to get involved in any of it. And because of that, he's going to gain 2 positions. I'm not sure what happened to this poor fellow, who is Hamilton. Alright, ProShell, now up to 7th place, right behind me, actually. And 7th place is where he finishes. That's an example of somebody who is able to handle the pressure, handle the bumps, handle being mistreated, and come out with a good result. That's the kind of thing that we want to emulate. That's the kind of thing that we want to accomplish when we're on track as well. Now, I need to, at this point, make just one caveat. Listen very closely. This is part of this heart-to-heart aspect to this episode. Everything I'm discussing with you today is not a position of looking down upon everybody else that retaliates and considering them to be awful people and just horrible, and how could you ever do that? Oh no, quite the contrary, friends. I come from a position of having retaliated a handful of times myself. Not that I would do it often, not that I would even get to big battles to the death with others, but I'm coming from a position of having responded what I would say is incorrectly. I've paid for it with in-race consequences, either penalties, or either that person then catches back up to me and then sends me flying off the track. And here's what I've really come to. To me, the greatest quote-unquote revenge, if you want to call it that, is catching the person that bumped me off the track, getting right up to his bumper, making him feel a little uncomfortable, and then passing him as cleanly as possible, not even denting or scratching his paint, and then going clean on by and never letting him catch me again. To me, that is the sweetest form of revenge you could possibly have. In the end, most of us in these dailies that we're driving, we're trying to have a good race, and we're all trying to accomplish certain goals. And part of the reason why I've determined myself to not retaliate is I don't want to be the guy that hinders someone else from achieving their goals. When I get hit off, and when I get knocked off the track from somebody who's decided to have, something against me, or they thought I did something that they perceived required immediate justice, the thing that I think about is, oh man, this is going to hinder my goals that I had for this race or this month or whatever it is that I'm trying to achieve. When I feel like that, that must be how other people feel as well. And I always keep that, honestly, in the forefront of my mind. Now, what about defending yourself? Are there cases where it is right to defend yourself? To answer this question, I'm going to use a line from Batman Begins, when Batman is talking about Ra's al Ghul in the train.
I won't kill you, but I don't have to save you.
Allow me to demonstrate one instance of this. So there seem to be occasions where people have a disregard for your existence on track. Case in point, this individual here does not really seem to care that I'm there, and then seems to actively try to push me off to the side. This is a case where this isn't my fault. I have a right to be where I am, and so I have no problem driving right through. Now, what I don't do is I don't retaliate. I don't try and push him back. I just hold my line, and the result is we get right by him. In this other instance here, we have a person who also seems to have a disregard for my existence. Right off the bat, he hits me going into the initial turn there. And then going into the left turn, he hits me once. When I'm clearly there, hits me again. And then the next hit essentially puts me into the wall and pinches me. Now in this next spot, you can see I am trying to recover from being pinched. The way the game works and how you end up with the ping pong effect, I've been essentially hit a little bit more into him. I'm turning left, trying to recover, and the outcome, well, it's not the best. It's not what we would want. It's not what I necessarily want. But because of this guy's disregard for my existence on track, he ends up going into the wall. All I've done is try to hold my line. All I've done is try to hold my racing line. In this case, it's not up to me to make sure he doesn't get into the wall. It's up to me to make sure I can maintain control of my car and maintain my racing line as I have the right to do. I have determined to not retaliate. But if someone is obviously targeting me, hitting me, knocking me into the wall, just like this example, let's just say I'm not going to go out of my way to avoid them. I'll stay on the racing line, and I'll do what is best for my race. If that ends up being a little bit detrimental to them, I can live with that. But I never, and hopefully we never get into situations where we are just one of two people that have just begun destroying each other. Do your race. If someone decides that he doesn't care that you're there, hold your ground. Just hold your ground. That's all you need to do. And I think if you do that, you'll find that there's great satisfaction in knowing that you are the better person and the better driver on track. And then most of the time, you can also see that person who has been treating you so poorly basically ruin their own race for themselves. That's typically how it goes. As we bring this episode 3 to a close, what are the key points that we want to drive home? First of all, don't get upset about the things that are outside of your control. Just focus on what you can control. Focus on yourself. You can't change them, right? Disappointment? Yeah, sure, you could be disappointed. I think that's fine. But mad? To the point where you're actually angry? I don't think there's any benefit for that. Me personally, I choose to go over what I could have done better in that situation, and I try to learn from it. When I do this, and I actually do this on a regular basis, I should be better equipped to handle future similar situations. For example, let me show you one of the instances in which I learned the term defend the apex. I do feel that I was done wrong in this race. I have a 3rd place, possibly a 4th place, depending on how this battle goes. Now, it is safe to say that during this race, I saw 777's way of driving, and once he started to catch me on this last lap, I wasn't too happy about it because I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to handle his aggressive style. And let's just say that it doesn't end up very well for me. I do believe I'm the victim of a couple of dirty moves here. One there. And then finally, right here. And which this ends up, I believe, putting me back up into 9th place. So I got a 3rd place taken from me, and it turns into a 9th. However, I believe that I am also at fault because I did not defend myself properly. He's pushed to pass, and he has not gone very wide here. He does give me enough space to be on the inside, but I'm there and I have the run. He is turned all the way to the left at the moment. You can see by his steering inputs. He's all the way to the left. He should be straight at this point. Furthermore, he turns right here. However, he's turning left at this point. So very clearly, it's hard to argue that this was not intentional to throw me into the rocks. But I believe that this could have been avoided if I had done one simple thing. And it happens actually in this spot right here. Do you guys see my mistake? I take this corner as if no one is around me. And I should have defended. I should have stayed to the right. I should have protected the apex like we talked about in previous episode. Instead, I allow this opportunity to happen. I blame me because I could tell what this driver was all about before, just during the race. And so this is my mistake. I could do better. And let me tell you, this experience actually taught me a lot. And it's these types of experiences that can teach all of us, actually. Yeah, I could go away from here saying, wow, what a mess this guy is. Why did he do that to me? It's not fair. It's not how you're supposed to race. And it would be true. But what benefit will it do if I just complain about somebody else and not analyze my own tactics here and try to improve for future races? That's what it's all about. Next key point to drive home. Undisciplined responses to taps, bumps, hits, and punts will affect your finishes, and they will lower your driver ranking. What could be hindering your advancement in the driver rating system in GT7 is that you aren't handling others' treatment of you very well. If you are retaliating and you're losing positions in the process, you cannot gain driver rating. You won't be able to get to B. You won't be able to get to B to A, and then beyond. Think about the races that you have and compare them to our discussion that we've had today. After watching this episode, do you agree? Do you disagree? I said at the beginning of this episode that it would be all right if we disagreed, and I do stand by that. However, I would say that if you fundamentally disagree, if you fully disagree, that you believe that retaliation is absolutely necessary, if that's the case, I have one question for you. What rank are you? How long have you been there? If the answer is you are ranked A or lower, could your retaliations and fights with other drivers, could they actually be the reason why you're stuck? If you have a different take or disagree, let me know in the comments. If there are things that you hadn't thought of before, or things that you might want to implement now, let me know that as well. Episode 3 is now in the books, and this concludes the E through C lobbies category for Essential Racing Strategies. So next in Essential Racing Strategies, we move to B-rated lobbies. We will be keeping the same format as before. We will focus first on your weekly objectives, then what your top priority is, and also what your mindset should be. Looking forward to those episodes, and I'll see you then on Essential Racing Strategies.